Hi, it's Ivy Slater. Welcome to Slater Success Live. Today, we're talking with an amazing expert. And, this is something that is all what everybody is talking about right now. Human resources, HR, what's going on in the HR world? Well, Marc Roberts is the founder and CEO of My HR Department. He's a single point of contact for all HR needs, a full service outsourced consultancy. Marc and his dedicated team of former Fortune 500 human resource professionals are highly skilled at alleviating ongoing time sensitive HR practices inherent in any business, and I would say in any and all business, because I know some of the questions that are going to be talking about today is, hey, with this remote world, with people going back to the office, what are we seeing out there in the marketplace? Well, Marc, thank you for joining me because it is pertinent, it is current, and it's an important conversation. Hello, Marc Roberts.
Hey, Ivy, thanks for inviting me. I'm very excited to be here.
And listeners, viewers, as you're scrolling through LinkedIn, feel free to pop in questions, comments, anything you want to know. Of course, always feel free to connect with Marc on LinkedIn. He really is a go-to expert in the field and a gentleman that I've had the opportunity to share some great pizza, salad, and other meals with. So, Marc, give us a little bit of an idea of what, just like, let's take a step back to go forward. What caused you to start My HR Department?
Well, it was we had been in the recruiting and staffing business, quite honestly, for many, many years. And as the recruiting business, due to financial concerns in the country, I mean, the 2007, 2008, failure of the financial markets, tough times, there wasn't a lot of recruiting going on, but yet a lot of our clients still came back and said, can you help us with HR matters? And, long story short, my HR department was born out of a need for concierge HR services. A lot of our clients wanted to have a trusted advisor that they could pick up the phone and call when they had a need. They maybe didn't have the need for a full-time resource, but prior to my HR, they had no place to go. They could go to their attorney, and if it wasn't an employment law attorney, well, they didn't get they got good advice, but maybe not the best advice. And so we've been doing this for close to 15 years plus. And our clients range from startups that are looking to find out how to hire their first employee to companies with several hundred employees that are looking for very niche oriented projects. Or in some cases, we've taken over the HR function for them. I like to say we give entrepreneurs and C-suite executives the opportunity to sleep better at night.
I like that. And it is so true, because I know so often conversations with my own clients is conversations around team, and hiring and performance and the nuances right now in the world we're living, which is this hybrid work environment that brought in a whole new set of questions for HR and questions on the legal side of, how do you navigate this world?
Well, the remote work is here to stay. Some companies, although a lot of companies are starting to think about going back, a lot of companies have crossed the line that they can't go back to full-time in the office. Companies historically, prior to the pandemic, had a geographic presence, whether it be Midtown Manhattan, New Jersey, or someplace. They had all of their employees in a central place. Fast forward, the pandemic comes, companies need to work. Companies have employees that relocate out of what I'll call hot zones, and these people are not coming back. So remote work is here to stay, and companies have to recognize that if you have employees working in other states, other municipalities, other jurisdictions, you have to comply not only with the laws and where your company is based from a headquarters perspective, but you now have to comply with the laws for wherever your employees are located. So when we would do an employee handbook for a company based in New York, it was quite simple. We just do all the New York City, New York State laws as well as federal. Now I just sent out a proposal today for a company that's got a location in Missouri and a location in New Jersey, as well as New York and Florida. That handbook is now a base handbook in New York and 3 appendices to cover the laws in the other states. A lot of complexity, but it doesn't have to be that complex if you just follow the laws and find out what you need to do to register in those states and to comply with the laws that are now in addition to where your headquarters may be located.
And it's so, it's interesting. We went remote in a moment, right? I'll say, we
Sure.
went remote on March 16th. All of a sudden, it's like, good morning. Yeah, the old Robin Williams movie. Mark and I can talk this. Good morning, Vietnam. And I'll always say it's like, good morning, Vietnam. March 16th, 2020. We are remote. And now in clients and in various networking, we're living in this hybrid world, but we're also starting to learn that as leaders of companies, Mary went and bought a home in Pennsylvania and is kind of working out of there several days a week because we're living in a remote world, and they were able to get more bang for their buck as a family, and it was a great thing. And then, Fred did this in Delaware because, they always wanted to have a home by the water, and now they could, and he only needs to be in the office twice a month or whatever it's looking like. And we don't realize what we need to know because we've never needed to know that before.
No, absolutely. And one of the things that my HR department brings to companies, both large and small, is the peace of mind to know that the compliance side of your business is in check. Whether you have one employee or thousands of employees, you still have to comply with federal, state, and local law. There's no exceptions.
Yeah.
And for many of the smaller companies, they use, and not to diminish, their smarts or anything, but a lot of companies think, oh, I met payroll this week. I fulfilled all my HR obligations. No, you've got to comply. Small companies there's probably 10 to 15 laws that every small company has to comply with, regardless of their size. And then as you ratchet up the numbers, more and more laws start to pile onto that matrix. So that's where I say we give people a peace of mind. A lot of entrepreneurs and business owners don't know what they don't know. But I'll give you an example.
And I'm going to stop you there because there happens to be a very true statement around that, right? I know in the early stages for me building a business, I didn't know what I didn't know. I didn't know to go find this information out because I didn't know I needed the information.
Right.
And so we have this catchphrase and everybody says it truly casually, oh, we don't know what we don't know, which is fine, but we don't know what we don't know until we get that letter in the mail. And then we're backtracking. And I always love to say, like, I prefer to run a business, any of my businesses, and, guiding my clients and having those conversations. We're working on an offense versus a defense.
No, absolutely. I'll give you a quick example. A small healthcare practice in Manhattan got fined what is the equivalent of 10% of last year's revenue. Ooh. Just because somebody from a city government agency walked in and didn't see the proper postings in the office. So now not only are they fighting a fine that was the equivalent of 10% of last year's revenue, but now they have attorney's fees on top of that.
Right.
Very unfortunate for them. But, they called us afterwards. It was like, oh, maybe we should have some HR resources. And I mean, maybe when I write my first book, I'll talk about all of the stories of things that people could have done on a preventative basis if they had the right information, if they had the right trusted advisor to go to. It just never ends.
Right. It's about that proactive mode. It's about that proactive mode. A great. I like to play with numbers. I think numbers tell a story. Okay. Mm-hmm. I know I'm not a CFO, so understand I'm not a CFO, but I just, scribble and scratch numbers, and I'll ask some questions and scratch some numbers. I was like, and then I'll ask a question based on that, right? Proactive by looking at something. Now, a client or somebody will say to me, like, how did you think about that? I was like, I didn't know it. And honest to God, and I'll say this, when I started Slater Success, I didn't know what I didn't know. And I think that's a little bit of the theme of today, Mark, is when I started this company, coming out of running a printing business for over 20 years, I didn't know how much I knew about running a business until people said, hey, can I ask you this? And I was like, who are they talking to?
Well, a lot of human resources, quite honestly, it's not rocket science. A lot of it is out there. There's federal, state, and local websites that have a lot of the laws. But think of it this way. Most business owners don't have time to research, interpret, and then roll out everything that's on the New York State Department of Labor website, much less determine what is applicable to their business. So that's where I say we give them the peace of mind and the ability to sleep at night by we make sure we monitor their business, they know what's important to their business, and we get that foundation of compliance out of the way and fix it.
And I just, listeners and viewers, as you're scrolling through LinkedIn, if you have any questions, and you could be as specific as you want, this is the window of opportunity to ask your HR question from Marc or myself. Not that I'm not the HR expert, but if you have questions, feel free to pop them in. If something resonates with you, please put that in the comments. We know that the video is live right now, as well as it is going to be continuing to scroll through LinkedIn, and people will post. Marc and I are going to be on these posts for the next several days to a week or two to continue to answer and be on your game to help you have the resources you need as leaders. So Marc, let me ask you this. What is one of the most unusual things you've seen? Okay. I mean, of course, there was, March 16th, 2020, of like all of a sudden we started running remote businesses. And there was a lot of questions from both of our client lists of what do I need to know? But now that we're moving here and we're in this hybrid world, what are some of the questions that are coming up from the clients you work with and the people in the know?
Well, one of the biggest issues is the Great Resignation today.
Yeah.
Companies struggling to find employees. And there's several reasons for it. One, and I've had this discussion with a lot of clients, they don't necessarily agree with me, but here's some of the things that I share with them. One, you have to pay people a living wage, a competitive wage. To attract and retain talent, you've got to make it a workplace that people want to come to. Post-COVID, it's got to be a safe workplace. You've got to do what you have to do to make sure that there's PPE around if it's necessary. People are socially distant in the workplace. Maybe give them that hybrid approach to, come in for a few days, work remote for a few days, and listen to your employees. I wrote a piece this morning on LinkedIn. The exit interview is not the time to figure out what's broken in your company.
Ooh, I'm going to stop it there because that is brilliant. Because I think so often when we do those exit interviews, when somebody is leaving, whether, voluntarily, we looked at, okay, do we need to fix anything, or do we, gather any information? But when you say that's not the time to fix what's going on in your company, how can, as leaders, be on their game and be proactive in that way and not use the exit interview?
Communicate with your employees and listen to your employees. The example that I wrote about is a friend's child who was working in a professional services firm in New York City. Yep. And for the last 7 to 8 months, they've been working 70, 80 hours a week, just nonstop. Nobody bothered to listen. Bad scheduling, bad time frames on projects. And when this person decided to say that they were leaving the company, it's like, why didn't you tell us? Well, this young man has been telling them for the last 7, 8 months that this is unsustainable. And then he decided, well, let's set up an exit interview so we can talk about these things. And this was a highly valued employee. So waiting till the exit interview to see what's wrong is not the time. It's too late. But what you have to do is you have to listen to your employees, whether there are periodic staff meetings. Don't just ask about the work. Ask them, how are you feeling about the work?
I was just going to say, what are some of the questions you like to train people and prompt people to ask their employees to gather that information?
I always say when you're having a meeting with employees, don't dive right in. Get into the personal side. How was your weekend? What do you like about what's going on? Let them speak. You'll get a sense of how they're feeling before you just dive in like, okay, let's discuss project A. No. You have to check in with people. Hey, do you have enough resources? Do you have enough hours in the day? I know we're asking a lot. Is there a way we can do it better? Get them involved in the day-to-day discussions. Don't just put them in front of a computer and say, here's your deadline. Let me know when it's done. It doesn't work.
I happen to agree with you wholeheartedly. And I will say one of the things, I've been running a Monday morning team meeting for way before I've had Slater success. Slater graphics back in the day, Monday morning, it was a production meeting every Monday morning. Slater Success has a team meeting every Monday morning, 9:15. And we open with, honest to God, weekend highlights.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's, hey, I got my hair done. And sometimes it's, we did this with the kids. Sometimes it's, I had date night. Sometimes I had girls' night out, whatever it's looking like. But we make sure we spend, because the one thing I've learned is, as I meet my people where they are and I know what's important to them in their life, I could then make sure that the companies I run meet them at their level of importance.
Absolutely. As I think I mentioned to you earlier, I have an employee, a valued team member, who's dealing with an unfortunate family situation. She's been checking in, like, what can I do? What can I do? You know what? Take care of your family. That's the important thing right now. And she keeps thanking me profusely. And it's like, no, you got to do that stuff. Because first of all, you won't be of any value to the team with the distraction and the burden that you're dealing with right now. So just go take care of business, and also letting her know that the team is covering her area of the business, her clients at this point. So giving her that peace of mind, that creates value between an employer and an employee, to know that, hey, you're human on both sides.
And I think there's a big piece of importance there, of to know that everyone is human.
Yeah.
And in the same way, so when you see people not do something as to the best of you, the way you would have liked it's completed, are there any great tips on how to have those difficult conversations? And before you answer that, I want to again mention that anybody has any comments or questions, so it's not all my questions for Marc. I have a lot of interest of knowing how to run great HR in any company that I have touched in my past and in my future. But we're here for your questions as well. I think sometimes some of the struggles are the difficult conversations that has to happen. And I know I do a lot of guiding in it, and I know I've come to you and said, hey, I'd love your input on it. So now I'm asking you on the live. Difficult conversations, the good, the bad, and the ugly.
My rule has been always talk to people the way you want to be spoken to. If you're the employer, talk to these people like you're sitting in their seat. Understand what they're feeling, what their issues are, and be prepared to adjust. Yes, you may have a deadline with a client that you have committed to. And yes, it might be a multi-million-dollar contract or even a $50,000 contract. But you have to communicate in a way to understand what the pain points are that the employees that are trying to get you to the end of that contract are feeling. And you have to work with them to help them understand why this contract is so important. Bring people into the conversation. Make them feel like they're part of what's going on, not just a body crunching numbers or designs or whatever the case may be. And, depending on, if it's something else, you have to assess in the moment. Treat people with humanity, and you'll get 1,000% back. I've seen it work every time.
Okay, so that leads me to, it's a beautiful segue of all of a sudden with this hybrid workforce. So we're working from home part-time. We have no boundaries.
Very simple. And I'll give you two examples. Instead of, got one client that can go on their computer in their office and see how many keystrokes another employee is doing, regardless of where they are. They can actually see what they're doing on their computer. Too big brother for me. The better way to do that is to set guidelines, set metrics. Hey, I need to achieve this goal by this period in time. And don't worry about how it gets done. As long as it gets done to your satisfaction and meets your criteria, then that's how you do it. Instead you can micromanage, as some companies are doing. They want to know what you're doing every hour of the day. And other companies are, if we're professional, then ask our employees to meet certain goals and put those goals into writing and make sure that they're understandable, quantifiable, and manage that way. So.
It makes so much sense, and it sounds so easy.
It's not. It's not, because these people could be 100 miles away, 1,000 miles away. But if I am an employee that's 1,000 miles from my employer, and I know I have a deadline to get to, and I have to get certain things done, then the follow-up to that is I know that if I don't meet those criteria, I either better have a damn good reason, or my performance review is going to reflect that I'm not meeting that criteria. It's really not that complex.
So on the other side of there are no boundaries, we have organizations, and these are honest to God conversations I'm having, where people are getting emails, notifications at 6, 9, 11 p.m. Saturday, Sunday. What are the, here I am, let's say we're back in the day when we were young and ambitious and building up our careers. There's people who are not CEOs yet. They're managers, they're vice presidents, they're directors, and they're working their way up. And how did they deal with, when do you respond? How do you not respond? And how do you create some boundaries for yourself?
That's probably the toughest question you've asked me at this point. Because
it's a real life scenario that somebody recently came to me with.
Yeah, no, it is. I think that's to have a discussion with if this company has an HR function or the hiring manager, and say, what are your expectations? And just get an understanding. And to the point where don't have your phone on when there's certain times. You're not required to work 24/7. That's not what you signed on to. And I think as an employee, you need to speak with your management and say, look, do I really need to be on call 24/7? That's not the deal. And I think as employers, we have to respect, we have to set boundaries that if an employee doesn't answer Friday night at 11:30 or Saturday morning, at noon, that's okay. It's one of the toughest things. I mean, I have clients that are sending me emails at 2 a.m. and I will just say to them, what is it about sleep you have a problem with? It's got to be a conversation. There's no simple magic wand for that one.
And that goes back to what you were saying earlier about open communication.
Yeah. I mean, you have to have open communication. You have to allow your employees to talk to you freely, respectfully, and you as the employer have to communicate in a way that they understand what your side of the equation is.
And I will say,
it's a lot to ask in some environments, but most people get it.
And I will say, for somebody who has done an enormous amount of training and work with clients in the communications area, most people think of communications as the speaking component. The strongest piece of communication is the listening component.
Absolutely.
So if you want to strengthen your communication skills, start with strengthening your listening skills.
Just to double back something you asked about the remote work and employees and this great resignation. I think a lot of companies have found that, while you may be geographically centered, the new world is hiring people in other municipalities and locations across the country to fill the needs. There's a lot of talented people. I saw an accounting firm do that very early on in the pandemic. And not only did they get great talent that they couldn't find locally, but they lowered their overhead in terms of salaries. The salary for a CPA in Topeka, Kansas is a lot different than the salary for a CPA in Midtown Manhattan. But they got really good people. And with technology today, the world is seamless.
It's interesting because I was at an airport last weekend. So many of my stories start with, I was on an airplane. I was on an airplane. I was on a subway. But I was in the airport lounge last weekend, and somebody's flight was who's sitting right behind me, got delayed, and started a conversation. I leaned into the conversation when they said something about Maine, because I love the state of Maine, going there this summer, etc. So I leaned into that conversation really fast, and we started talking. And she's like, it's amazing because in my breadth of work, she goes, I have attorneys that I work with in New York City where you are. And for, not the partner level, I'm paying X amount in the hourly wage. And she goes, now and then I'm working with the founding partner in Maine, who's half. And she goes, and I look to balance out my spend nationally.
Yeah.
So it's, there's been an enormous, to say this clearly, I truly think the pandemic has opened up an enormous amount of opportunity in so many areas. And it's a matter about the CEOs, the leaders of organizations to actually see those opportunities and step into it, and truly seek counsel like Marc in my HR department. Even when, I always find interesting when I talk to you, Marc, is you come in as an outsourced HR department at times, and then you come in to complement the HR department who can't do it all because the company is too large. And I was like, how in the world can you do both?
Well, one of the things that happen, one of the things we do a lot of is, for the larger companies, as you alluded to, that have a robust HR presence internally, there are certain areas of the business where you need expertise from the outside. For example, we do a lot of compensation work. Compensation is something you don't have a compensation expert on your staff because it's not something you look at on an ongoing basis. So we get brought into larger companies to do compensation studies, whether it be incentive plans, just overall restructuring compensation. So that's how we get into companies that have 300, 400, and 500 employees. They don't need us for the day-to-day, for the compliance, for the employee handbooks, or some of the other things that we do, or employee relations, but they need us for some of those things that you typically go outside for. So that's why we're a single point of contact for all things HR, from helping the little guy get started to working with the big clients that have a particular niche-oriented project, to working with middle market companies that really just want us to do the day-to-day HR for them.
And I admire you. We both have a big heart around nonprofits, and we both do some work in nonprofits and complement each other there. It's, on the business side of nonprofit, we're always looking at, keeping the overhead streamlined. And yet when you have people working, you must have an HR department. So I love that you fill that role for so many nonprofits of being that resource.
It turns out probably about 40% of our practice is in the nonprofit space. And we just onboarded a roughly 220 person nonprofit, federally funded. And, they lost a lot of grants during the pandemic. So their whole organization got decimated, including HR. So we're kind of putting it all back together for them. Well,
viewers, as you continue to scroll and you catch some of this interview with Marc and I, please remember to put some comments below. What resonated with you? What was the greatest point that you want to take forward? It's always a great resource to share that forward, and it helps others, as well as continue to post any comments or questions you might have. Marc and I will be continuing to follow the stream and be a resource to answer any questions. Marc, share a little bit how our viewers can be in touch with you.
Well, you can check us out at www.myhrd.biz. You can call me at area code 914-243-9155, extension 101, or you can email me at marc@myhrd.biz. Happy to talk with you, answer any questions you may have, and give you some guidance.
And remember, on LinkedIn, you can always message through at LinkedIn. You can message Marc, message me. The greatest thing about being a proactive leader is about planning ahead, and take these interviews that we're doing on Slater Success Live as a resource to be proactive in running your business, your organization, in your firm, to lead forward. Marc, thank you so much for joining me today.
It's a pleasure, Ivy. Good to see you.
Good to see you as well. And viewers, stay tuned. We're going to be having more coming through on Slater Success Live, as I have one coming up in the next couple of weeks. You could continue to check in on LinkedIn and see where we are, when we're posting, when we're going live. Plan your questions and come join us. Thanks for joining me here today.